All right, today we're going to spend another day working with rational expressions. And the main thing we're going to do today is add and subtract them. All right? And remember that a rational expression is a fraction expression. So that means if I add or subtract two fractions, I have to have a common denominator. If I was doing 5/8 minus 1/7, just a basic fraction problem, I would have to change these so they both had a common denominator, something like 56. And in this case, I multiply the bottom by 8, and I multiply the top by 7. And now I can subtract these numbers, of course, and get 27 over 56. But the important thing about that little problem that I did that I want you to notice is, can't I always get a common denominator? It might not be the least common denominator, but can't I always get a common denominator by multiplying the two denominators together? So if you'll notice, in this case, I did 7 times 8, and in this case, I did 8 times 7. The reason that's important is because of problems like our first example. You'll be asked to add or subtract. And let's say that we have a problem like this. X over x minus 3 minus 2 over 3x plus 4. Well, just like the problem I started with, we can get a common denominator by multiplying these two together. So we should probably first identify what that least common denominator is. The least common denominator is x minus 3 times 3x plus 4. That is the least common denominator in this case. So what we have to do now is multiply each of these fractions by a form of 1. That's what we did up here. 7 over 7 is 1. 8 over 8 is 1. So really all you have to do is see which one it does not have. Well, this fraction does not have the 3x plus 4. So what we're going to do is multiply it by 3x plus 4 over 3x plus 4. We're going to multiply that by that first fraction, by the x over x minus 3. Because that's the piece of the least common denominator it doesn't have. All right? Very important that you see that first step, because that's kind of the foundation to everything we're doing today. The second one, this fraction, does not have the x minus 3. So we're going to multiply the second fraction by x minus 3 over x minus 3. That's going to be multiplied by the second fraction. Same idea. All right? Now, it's also very important that you notice that there's a subtraction sign between these two fractions. You better put that down. Okay? Now, we have a least common denominator, all right, and I'm out of space here, so I'm going to have to go to a new screen. But what we're going to do next is we're going to use distributive property on top, because we need to simplify this numerator, all right? So my denominator is 3x plus 4 times x minus 3. 3x plus 4 times x minus 3 is my denominator. My numerator, the first one I need to distribute. X times 3x is 3x squared, so it's going to be 3x squared plus 4x. 3x squared plus 4x when I do distributive property there. The second fraction we need to be more careful with. When I distribute this 2 could just as easily have been written over here. like that. What kind of 2 is that? It is a negative 2, and that is one of the very common mistakes, is to forget that negative there because it's subtraction. Remember, subtraction is the same thing as a negative. So when we distribute this 2 through, we are distributing a negative 2 times x and a negative 2 times negative 3. So it's going to be negative 2x plus 6. All right. And we're close to being home now. Combine my like terms on top, and I have 3x squared plus 2x plus 6 all over 3x plus 4 times x minus 3. Now, one thing I want to make sure that we get is this idea of what happens once we get a least common denominator. I kind of went quickly to this step right here. Notice that I put it all over that one denominator. Okay, I did it all over 1. That's because that's what you do once you have a common denominator. Look over here at this problem. Isn't this just like we did 35 plus 8 over 56? I mean 35 minus 8 over 56, right? Same idea. You put it all over that one denominator. Okay, let's do another problem. Three over x minus 1 minus 2 over x plus x plus 3 over x squared minus 1. This problem is a little bit more hairy, but it's not that bad once you see what to do. Now what we've got is we've got several factors here. We've got 3 fractions, all right? But one thing we have to remember is to use the factors to get the least common denominator. Isn't this the same thing as x plus 1 times x minus 1? Right? My least common denominator, okay, we might want to just add a note here. Note. My LCD must have 1 of every factor. Okay? My least common denominator must have 1 of each. So, let's look at the factors that we have. Okay? When I come up with my least common denominator, don't I have an x minus 1? There's my first factor. I have an x. There's my next factor. Now notice I said 1 of everything. The last one, doesn't it also have an x minus 1? I don't need to write it again. Okay? But what's the one thing we don't have yet? The x plus 1. So we have to have 1 of every factor in my least common denominator. All right? Once you have that identified, then it's just like the last problem. All right? So let's look at this first fraction right here. What we have to say is, which factors is it missing? Well, which factors is this denominator missing? It's missing the x, and it's missing the x plus 1, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this first one by this over itself. All right? So we're going to have x times x plus 1 over x times x plus 1, and that's going to be multiplied by that first fraction, 3 over x minus 1. Because those are the 2 factors it's missing. All right? When we look at the middle one, it is missing the x plus 1 and the x minus 1. So that's what I have to multiply the top and bottom by. So I'm going to multiply, now I'm subtracting, okay, so it's going to be x plus 1, x minus 1 over x plus 1, x minus 1 times 2 over x. All right. The third fraction is just missing the x, right? This one just needs the x. That's the only thing that it is missing. So I'm going to multiply the third fraction by x over x. And it's plus x over x times that third fraction, which was x plus 3 over x squared minus 1. Okay? Now, this problem is uglier, but from this point it will start to clean up a little bit. First, let's put my least common denominator down. My least common denominator is x times x plus 1 times x minus 1. We've already figured that out, so we're going to have one big long line here, and we're going to put that whole numerator on top. Okay? So first, on this first term, I'm going to distribute this 3x. It's 3x. I'm going to distribute it through. So it's going to be 3x squared plus 3x. Okay? Now the middle term is a little bit sneaky. We need to be careful on the middle term. This is the same thing as x squared minus 1. Isn't it a difference of two squares? Right? And what am I distributing through it? Be careful. Negative 2. Negative 2 is what you're distributing through. So it's going to be minus 2x squared plus 2 after I distribute that through. The last one is not so hard because I've got a plus here, and I'm just distributing x through x plus 3. So this will be plus x squared plus 3x. Okay? Now, the hard part is done. Now all we have to do is combine my like terms. I've got an x squared term there, there, and there. So that looks like 3 minus 2, which is 1, plus 1, which is 2. So that will be 2x squared. I have a 3x and a 3x here, so that will be plus 6x. And then I have a plus 2. And that whole thing is over my least common denominator. Okay? Now, one other thing real quick. And we may have to add, a couple more notes on this tomorrow. Simplify this complex fraction. And a lot of people get these two situations confused. But hopefully we can clear it up here a little bit. If I want to simplify this complex fraction, well, what I want to do is get rid of the complexity. I want to get rid of the fractions. So watch how we can do this. What we're going to do is look at these two denominators. What is the least common denominator of those two? The LCD, isn't it x times x minus 1? If I was just looking at those two fractions, isn't that the least common denominator? We're going to multiply the top and bottom by that. Okay? We're going to multiply this by the least common denominator and this by the least common denominator. Now the reason we do that is because it will make the complex fraction part go away. All right? So we have to distribute it times this term and this term, and distribute it times this term and this term. So let's do that down below. X times x minus 1 times 2 over x. Well, remember, this is over 1. Okay? Minus 3 times x minus 1. All over 1 times x minus 1. I'm doing it on the bottom now. I'm distributing right here. Minus x times x minus 1 times this fraction. 1 over x minus 1. And again, I need to put that one over 1. Now, once you've got this far, it only gets easier. Now we can get out the slasher and make the complex fraction go away. Those go away. And down here, the x minus 1's go away. Okay? Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to simplify this right above and below. On this one, now I just do distributive property. 2x minus 2 minus, now this is a negative 3x, minus 3x squared plus 3x. There's my numerator. Okay, just doing distributive property. All right. And on bottom, I'm doing distributive property again. X squared minus x. This one's much easier. Minus x. It's the only thing that's left. From there on out, it's just combining like terms. On the bottom, I can, these x's just go away. Right? No, they don't. That's my fault. No, that's x, I'm sorry, that's x squared minus 2x. This is x squared minus 2x. On top, it's negative 3x squared plus 5x minus 2. And that problem is done, and we will stop there for today.